Hello. I don't even know what time it is. Good morning, good afternoon for a couple of you that may be overseas watching us. I am super excited. I always love chatting with Art Gross. In fact, we were chatting in the green room and time slipped just a little bit. So we're just a couple of minutes late, but the wait was worth it. I promise. We are going to be talking about all kinds of changes that are happening inside the MSP industry, what's going on in the cyber insurance world, and why are we now talking about cyber resilience instead of talking about cybersecurity, or maybe in addition to talking about cybersecurity. I'm going to introduce my guest. I'm not sure he really needs an introduction. I kind of feel like you're kind of I was going to say Joe Biden of the MSP world. That may be a good thing or a bad thing, depending which side of the fence you are
I
on.
could go. That could go a lot of different ways. But
I feel like everybody knows your name and your face. But
yep.
Art Gross, you've kind of been a staple in the community for I don't know, a dozen or so
12
years.
years, 12 years so far.
Okay.
And plus, I've been an MSP for 23 years. So,
yes.
Yes. So thank you, Jennifer. It's a thrill to be here. As always, love talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. So you're here, you're talking about, you've kind of got your foot in a lot of different places. So like you said, you've got your MSP, you've got Breach Secure now, and then I was going to say your newest venture, but I don't know that for sure. Maybe you've got a couple other.
No, it's so far
okay.
InSkyber is the newest venture, and maybe the end of the new ventures. So when you get up to 4, it starts to become a little crazy, but,
little challenging to juggle all those roles for sure.
Yep.
So, okay, so I hinted at the first thing that I want to talk to you about, which is this newer term that I'm starting to see more and more, which is cyber resiliency. And so, or cyber resilience, I see it both ways. And so there is this slight shift away from talking about cybersecurity, talking to your clients about cybersecurity, and instead shifting to cyber resiliency.
Yeah.
What is the rationale behind changing that terminology? And then we'll probably dig into that just a little bit.
Yeah, it's the term of the week, right? But resiliency, I mean, in a way, you have to say you can put in layers and layers of cybersecurity, but you could still be breached, right? It takes an employee that makes a mistake. It takes, some unpatched system. So can you survive a breach? And those are the things that you really have to, and it isn't just, can you recover from ransomware? Can you survive from a reputation damage? Can you survive if you can't generate revenue for 3 weeks? So, what is your resiliency in terms of being prepared? Because, you think about it, if you have a fire in your house and you've planned for that, you've done a drill, where your valuables are, where your children are, your spouses, and you can get out. If you're not prepared, you're caught flat-footed. And I think it's the same thing with cybersecurity. If you plan to be breached, like, well, we don't want to be breached, but if it happens,
sure,
what can we do? And what should we do? And it isn't, because one of the things that I think is really important, clients have no idea what a data breach means, what it feels like, you're making decisions with no information. You're literally in the dark because the lights could actually be out, right? Your ransomware could bring down all your communication. So, and then you're going to have to make decisions at that moment with
instantly, yes,
like almost no information at all. So like that, it's almost like if you could get a client to actually feel what that is, then you can start talking about, well, these are the things that we can do to plan for that and to survive. And I think resiliency is a good term. I think it has to be balanced because, you clearly want to put the safeguards to protect the business, but you also want to put the safeguards to survive a breach. And I think that's really where cyber insurance comes in as well.
Yeah, I love that when you were talking about like a house fire or an issue. It's so interesting because many people do have the plan, like how to get out of the house. I had a friend who had a house fire and everybody got out. She grabbed the kids. Husband was out of town. So on the fly, she kind of redid her plan. So that piece was done. And she kind of had okay, what happens after the house is rebuilt? So, let's call it 90 days and forward. But there was this big gap in their planning because they'd never been through a house fire before. I've never been through a house fire. And so I walked that road with her to some extent. I didn't have the same feelings and the same loss, but just, it was very sobering to be like, okay, you have to buy new towels, you need to replenish your pantry, you need bedding, your children have no shoes because a fire seems to always happen in the middle of the night. And so it's that type of the details that even if your clients are like, well, I could recover,
Right.
First of all, maybe you could, but what is happening in those, that week or that 90 days between the incident or the situation and, okay, you're back up and running? There's a whole lot of headache that is happening.
And even in the situation of the fire, you have insurance. But
Yes.
that doesn't compress those 90 days. It really, it says what you're going to do. So, a lot of times people talk about ransomware and they worry about what the ransom is. It's really the loss of revenue, the disruption to the business. So it isn't just, okay, the ransom is 100,000 or 300,000, $500,000. It is, if your systems are down and you can't see patients, or you can't, meet with clients, or you can't take revenue in, what do you do during those, those 90 days, to actually, the average, I think, of a ransomware attack of downtime is 17 days. If you're not collecting, how are you going to pay payroll if you can't, a lot of businesses don't have enough money to survive not having any revenue coming in. So it's these are the type of things that MSPs need to be talking to clients about. It isn't that ransomware or that actual ransom. It's what's the disruption look like, and how, from a resiliency, how do you survive that?
I like that word, disruption. I also, early on, you said reputation damage. Like, I don't think that that's something that MSPs talk about enough. I think we do tend to go towards downtime, and we probably use the term downtime because we've got muscle memory, and that's how we sold BDRs. And so, that downtime terminology often comes out of our mouths when we're in that sales situation. But damage to reputation is a big one. And then business disruption, because you mentioned payroll, but there's also, like, you're having to pay for incident response, you're having to pay for, forensics, like all of these things are additional expenses that maybe insurance will cover later, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But in the meantime, you have to have a way to pay for them up front, at least, or a whole lot of credit to be able to put it on.
Some of the insurance policies will actually provide those vendors, so you don't. But the other thing is, if you don't have the insurance, the time to have those vendors lined up is not in the middle of, you don't want to start Googling forensics in the middle of a ransomware attack. I mean, you want to make sure that you're able to get the right vendors at the right time. The other pieces, and just to go along with the fire and the emotional, imagine you're a ransomware victim because one of your employees fell for a phishing email, and your whole systems are locked. You're worrying about getting your business back up. That employee wants to come into your office and cry and wants to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Like, the last thing you need right now is to, this emotional piece, right? And I don't mean to be cruel, but it's like, I'm trying to bring my business back up. But you also have maybe one of your best employees or an employee that you care about that made a mistake. You think about that, like, no one said, oh, we'll have to just deal, we'll have to, be resilient, but you're going to have to deal with emotions. And all your employees are saying, are we going to get paid? Are we going to, are we going to get fired? Like, there's so many moving parts of a data breach that businesses, I don't think, actually know about. And it's like what I think you call it, feel the gap, or
feel the gap. Help the prospects feel what it is going to look like if they stay without good insurance or good cybersecurity protections and without cyber resiliency, and something happens. There's a gap between where they should be and where they actually are. And if you can help them feel that before they're in the moment, then you're that much closer to making a sale.
Exactly.
All right, so you hinted at, okay, so we talked about cyber resiliency. I want to, at the end, we're going to talk about how to pull these things together and how MSPs can talk about this in the marketplace. But before we get there, you mentioned some shifts that are happening in terms of paying claims. And so you mentioned a traveler's case. Can we dig into that a little bit? Because I think that's something that MSPs need to know.
That I think that is groundbreaking. And it's very, so the big shift, before we get to travelers, the big shift is, cyber insurance carriers are paying out a lot of claims, right? Years ago, very easy to get insurance, 4 or 5 questions, maybe 10 questions. You have a firewall, you have antivirus. Okay, we'll give you insurance. And it was like $1,000, $1,500. It was cheap and easy to get. And then all of a sudden COVID hit and data breaches and ransomware, and carriers are paying out. So in response, they've done 2 things. One, they have raised premiums. Premiums have gone up. That $1,500 policy is now $5,000 policy. The amount that they will pay out is reduced. So, it may be $1 million policy, but if you have ransomware, it only covers 50,000, 100,000. So, but your policy is going up, we're covering less. But the other big thing is that the carriers want proof that you have implemented more cyber security. All right. They basically, that 10-question application is now 60 questions. It looks like a NIST-based risk assessment. It wants to know administrative safeguards, physical safeguard, technical safeguards. And even if you have insurance and you go for a renewal, you have to attest to all of these new side. It could change from year. It's changing month to month, but it can change year to year. So it's much harder to get insurance now, and it's much more expensive. And I don't think those trends are changing anytime soon.
Right. And that attestation, that risk assessment, if you will, that that MSPs are filling out for themselves, that clients are filling out for themselves, which is just scary. That is considered proof. I mean, just like when you have homeowners insurance and your insurance company says, do you have an alarm system? Right. You say yes, they give you a price break. They assume you're telling the truth. And probably for the alarm system, you probably are going to tell the truth. Like, why would you lie just to save $14 a month or whatever it is? So the challenge is that small business owners are filling this out for themselves. There's acronyms they don't understand.
Yeah, they probably don't even know what a sock is.
Right.
I'm wearing socks. Yeah. So
right. MFA, they spelled sock wrong. That's silly them. Right. And so they're probably, clicking yes and just drawing a line all the way down. Like, yes, we have all this stuff. Just give me my insurance. And then what's the implications of that? What is the ramifications of someone just saying, yes, we have all the things?
And they think they have it, and they actually get issued the policy, and they have a policy in their hand, and they feel like they have $1 million policy. They have $2 million policy. They go to sleep thinking this is great. If
good. Yes.
And then that affects, well, we don't need any more cybersecurity because I have this policy. But what really happens is, once you have a data breach, once you have, ransomware, data breach, some sort of financial fraud, the insurance company helps with forensics. They come in and evaluate what happened. And if they see that what you said you had, you really don't have, or what you said you were doing, you really weren't doing, they could deny the claim. So just because you have a policy, $1 million cyber insurance policy, doesn't mean that when you have a data breach, you're going to get paid out. And a lot of MSPs, I'm pretty active on social media, on LinkedIn and Facebook. And I hear, cyber insurance is a waste, carriers never pay. And it's like, that's not true at all. They pay a lot. And like we just talked about it. But the truth is, they shouldn't be expected to pay if it's a shared risk. We'll cover you, and we will take the risk as long as you implement the correct cybersecurity to lower the risk for both of us. And if you're not, it isn't fair that we have to pay when you haven't really lowered your own risk. It's almost like, you're driving on a highway and you're not wearing your seatbelt, and then you're calling someone. Well, it's a shared risk. You don't want to be hurt, and we don't want to insure you if you're not wearing a seatbelt. So I think,
or like the homeowners insurance. Okay, you have a robbery, and then the insurance company comes out and says, well, was your alarm turned on? And you're like, I don't have an alarm, because you forgot what you checked on the box 15 years ago. And they're like, I mean, you said you had an alarm and motion sensor lights. I don't see either of those. That may have stopped the robber. I'm not paying the claim. That is not, that's normal and expected with homeowners insurance. We get that. It's a corollary.
Now, all insurance, and especially cyber insurance, and they're asking more and more questions. They want attestation, but when something really goes bad, You have to be able to prove it. So in a way, when you fill out that application, you should almost, and especially what's happening now is MSPs are being asked by clients. So, we got this renewal, help us fill this out. In a way, MSPs should be looking at that and saying, what report can I generate out of, out of the RMM, out of any of my consoles? How can I prove that, I'm answering yes here? Can I prove it? And if you sit here and go, well, I don't know if we could prove it, that's a conversation that you may not want to be, because you may not want to be answering yes, because not all controls will stop you from getting insurance. They may, if you answer no to some of them, it may actually raise your premium, but you can still get insured. So, it's better to be honest and maybe pay a higher premium than to lie and get a lower premium, get insurance, and then not get covered.
And
so
then
it's
not get coverage, right?
Yeah.
Now you're paying for something that is useless because
Yep.
you lied.
Yep, you lied,
So-
exactly.
So let's talk about how that relates very directly to MSPs. So we were talking about, okay, you say you have MFA and then you get a breach and then it's not covered because you lied or you were incorrect, either one. So let's talk about something more basic, like a password policy. Let's say that you're an MSP and you're setting up a brand new user and you said, hey, your brand new user password is password 123, like the most hackable password in the world. But you have a policy that says you must change it upon logging in.
Right.
And maybe you don't force that. You just say, hey, here's your password. You should really change it. And then you have a business email compromise.
Yep.
The implication is that the insurance company may not pay because
Right.
you didn't
Well,
enforce your policy.
There's two implications. One, the insurance company may not pay, but the other piece is they could pay. And then they go and say, well, who was the cause of that breach? Why didn't the MSP actually force that? And that's called subrogation, where the insurance carriers actually are looking to recover the money they paid by who caused the breach.
Sure.
Okay, so we're starting to see MSPs, clients, insurance companies are starting to go after MSPs because you didn't protect this client and you actually caused that breach, which is frightening, and really, really kind of then says for an MSP, you better have your errors and omission, you better have your own cyber insurance because, carriers, as I was saying before, they're paying out and they're looking to recoup those payouts. One, by making sure there's more insurance and more cyber security, making sure premiums are the right amount, but also if some third party causes a breach, they go after that third party to try to collect that. So that is a dangerous situation for MSPs.
Okay. So for an MSP that is filling out what is the name of the
Application,
document?
the insurance application.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
So they're filling that out, the 6 pages, 10 pages, 15 pages, whatever it is, and growing almost by the
Yep.
day. Do you recommend that they keep the documentation like at that moment, like they actually have screen captures and reports and things to say, this is the reason I checked yes today, January, whatever, so February, whatever. Yeah. Okay. So that they can back up the reason I said yes.
Absolutely. It kind of gets back to that report. If you're saying you're implementing MFA, can we prove that we have MFA on all devices or throughout the infrastructure? If you're saying that you're training employees, are you really training employees? It gets into, you mentioned the Travelers case, and maybe, a lot of people haven't heard it, but I think it's worth telling the story and how it, the implications. So Travelers insured I think they were Illinois manufacturing. All right. So I think there was 50 employees. They filled out the application. One of the questions were, do you have MFA on all systems? They answered yes. And the company then became a ransomware victim. All right. And they filed the claim with Travelers, and Travelers, came in, they did forensic investigation, and they found out that the client only had MFA on the firewall. All right. So they were protecting their, the remote access and VPN, but not what was actually the cause of the data breach or the ransomware. And Travelers said, we're not paying that claim. The client sued, Travelers won. Okay. So, and they didn't pay the claim. That's huge. because that says that if you are saying that you are doing something and you're not, and you can't prove it, there's a case that travelers won this and they may not pay. So right there, that's a conversation MSPs need to have with clients. I mean, that you have to actually explain why that is. But there's other ramifications of that. Is what else? Like, so say take training. Security awareness training is kind of dear to my heart. If you say, yeah, we're training our employees and we're phishing our employees, and you come in and one of your employees caused a business email compromise, a financial fraud, but they never logged into the portal. They never took any training. Are you really training? Or because the carrier come in and say, yeah, you said you're training, but this employee never received training or didn't receive enough training, and you really weren't doing that, just like MFA, we're not going to pay on that. So,
or like you have the credit score thing that you're like, okay,
ESS, the employee secure score. Yes. Yep.
So all right, you come in, you're a brand new employee, maybe you've never worked in an environment with computers before. Let's just say you're brand new out of college, right? And so you have a horribly low score, 300. But you've been with the company for a year, the company that's claiming they're doing employee education, and your score is still 300 or 280. Maybe it dropped through attrition.
It probably would drop if you're not taking ongoing training, probably actually going down.
So now the company is like, first of all, the company is not doing employee training. If that's a client of yours as the MSP, and you've said, oh yeah, we're doing employee training, but you can't prove it because the score is going in the wrong direction. Exactly. Now we've got a massive issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great opportunity because one of the MSPs, and it's not just training, and the MSPs have trouble convincing clients to implement cybersecurity or to take it serious, or especially if it's ongoing. And so now that conversation could be, if you do have that breach, you tell the traveler story about MFA, you relate it to training, and you basically run a report and say, these employees haven't logged in, haven't taken training in 90 days or ever, you're at risk here. So we see the most successful companies in terms of the ESS and really adopting the training platform is when the CEO, the VP of operations, they say, we need your ESS to be at a 600, 630, 700 in the next 30, 60 days. And when the CEO says that and pushes it down, people start taking training. When the CEO doesn't care, people, then, you have some people who care about training and they'll take training. Others, I'm busy, I don't want to take it. So by using this example with travelers and how insurance could be denied, it's a great opportunity to go and talk to client management about how important it is to implement training and make sure that people are taking that training and make sure that you are providing phishing and all of the things that client may be resistant to. But this is a great opportunity to use cyber insurance to drive that adoption and engagement.
So I want to shift just a little bit. So someone said, Kellen is listening. Kellen Cohen, I know he uses.
Kellen's everywhere.
He is everywhere. He really is. He's doing some great things. So he's like, all right, two great minds on one podcast should be some great marketing takeaways from that. So I kind of feel like he just issued a throwdown. So let's talk about, yes, exactly. Total mic drop. Okay. So I want to talk about how do MSPs use the information and leverage this in their marketing and sales efforts. And I'm gonna kick us off for one. I think there is definitely some messaging around. Yes, of course, we are doing cybersecurity, which, by the way, some of your competitors are not. MSPs, they're still not getting on the cybersecurity train. They think they're going to retire before then. They just don't care. They're hedging their bets. They're keeping their fingers crossed while they sleep at night. Like they're not doing cybersecurity. So just talking about cybersecurity can give you an edge. But I think this messaging around cyber resiliency, like we are going to be there to help you bounce back. Like I'm almost picturing Gumby, I'm not saying to use Gumby in your marketing, but like just to say, listen, there's a lot that happens if and when there's an incident, if and when your employee clicks a link that they shouldn't. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen. But during that crucial time where you are having reputation damage. We're going to be right beside you, sharing best practices, perhaps sharing checklists and tips, communicating with the insurance carriers, companies that so that feels like a very good message from a sales standpoint as far as differentiation.
I think cyber insurance is the greatest opportunity that's ever been given to MSPs. And, as you know, we started as a HIPAA compliance company, and I thought that HIPAA was the greatest opportunity ever given. And then you realize compliance is only as good as enforcement. Okay. And if you're not getting enforcement, clients eventually wake up and say, I don't care. But cyber insurance is incredible, because if you can convince a client that if they're in the middle of a data breach, it's going to be bad. It's going to be painful. It could be expensive. It could be reputation damage. You could lose revenue. And all you have to do is convince them that they really need cyber insurance. And then you go and help them with that application. And you better have all of these things that the insurance company is asking for. All right. And we got to make sure we're doing this. So really, from a marketing perspective, you have to, sell the gap. This is the pain. And this is why insurance is going to come in with forensics. They're going to come in with, lawyers. They're going to come in with reputation management. They'll actually make up for business interruption. They'll pay for lost revenue. You really need this policy. But the insurance company is going to say, we will insure you, but you need to implement your MSP stack. All of the things that your MSP has been saying to you that you really need, your EDR, your data backup, your disaster recovery, training and phishing, and MFA and protection on, remote access and VPNs. You need to do this. So in a way, from a marketing perspective, you just have to sell the pain. Yes. And that insurance could really help you. And then the insurance carrier, as long as that, you can convince the client, well, you can't just say, yes, we haven't implemented this. That to me is one of the easiest sells in the world, right? Or sales. So I would actually shift my whole marketing around making the client understand the need for cyber insurance and let the cyber insurance carrier dictate, there are some problems with that, but at least the cyber insurance carrier dictate the fact that you need to implement the cybersecurity.
I love it. I think there's also an angle to be had, as I think like top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. Like typically in an MSP world, people are switching MSPs maybe once every 10 years. So it is a very long, not necessarily sales cycle, but marketing to sales cycle. But if in part of your marketing efforts, you found out when is their cyber insurance up for renewal, and you called them a month before and said, hey, not trying to sell you anything. Okay, well, yes, you are. So maybe don't say that part. But hey, your cyber insurance is up for renewal. When we talked at the BNI meeting or the chamber, you shared that with me. I just wanted to give you a heads up. You're probably going to get a 5 or 10 page document with all kinds of acronyms. I highly recommend that you don't just click yes on everything and say, oh yeah, we got all this, we're good to go. I'm happy to come in and take a look. We can run some reports. Maybe you even charge for that engagement if they're not a client, and you get some protection paperwork in place saying we're not fixing any of this. We're just, outside third party, and you charge for that. If you wish, I think you should, because it's highly valuable. And now you've got in your database I would call it a tickler file. When should I follow up with this prospect? When they have a need that I can fulfill, which usually we don't know when that need is. But with cyber insurance, we know when the renewal is if we start to ask that in our marketing.
And part of that marketing, I would just say, I would do it way before 1 month. Because it used to be, okay, the renewal's coming up, we'll start dealing with it a month before, and then we'll get the best price. But if they came in and said, you need to have, a SOC implemented, and you don't have it, you're not implementing a SOC in 30 days, all right, or SIM and configuring all that. So in a way, you almost have to start on some of this 4 months, 4 months before. So enough time to be able to implement what the carriers are asking for.
Great advice. Very good point. Yeah, I
really do like the putting a chargeable service around this. The more that you can be an expert in cyber insurance, that be able to talk about what carriers want, what trends are, be able to take complex applications and convert it to what the clients or prospects understand and what they need, you'll be a valuable resource, as opposed to maybe their existing MSP has no idea and they're,
Yes.
they're not being able to help them with that. So, I think it's a great opportunity, and especially, it's a good question, Kellen.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm thinking like you could interview, if you have a podcast or the ability to go live, even if it's not a weekly podcast, interview some insurance carriers, interview people who have been through the renewal process, who can talk about how much of a pain it was and how different it was this year than 5 years ago. So there's an opportunity for some relationship building and some collaboration there. Webinars, training opportunities, newsletter articles, blog posts, checklists.
Absolutely.
Like,
I mean, that's a way to differentiate yourself.
Yes.
We talked about it. If you're selling managed services, everyone's selling managed services, right? You look exactly like the guy or the company that is $80 an endpoint. You don't want to compete against that person.
No.
You want to compete that this is the trend, and cybersecurity is absolutely a differentiator, but cyber insurance is a great opportunity. Now, there is a problem though with that, and because a lot of the carriers now, they're these insurtechs. They basically look like insurance carriers, but they're wrapping services around that. So instead of relying on the client to say, "Are you implementing training?" They provide training. They provide. So they basically start to compete with the MSP. All right. So I said it was the greatest opportunity. It also could be a threat, because we're seeing some clients are coming back to the MSP and saying, "Oh, my carrier will implement this antivirus. I don't need your SentinelOne anymore." And it's like, you don't want that. And so you really, if you're an MSP, you want to work with a carrier or a broker that is in your, on your side. They're not going to compete with you. They want you to help them secure the client, but not provide the services that would compete with your services. So that's definitely a heads up on for if you're an MSP and your client is looking at some of those carriers that provide those services, you could have that conversation. And then you have to justify why your technology is better than what they're providing.
Sure, of course. But if you're doing it with existing clients, hopefully you've got a decent relationship and reputation with those clients. It's probably a little bit trickier with the net new clients. But I agree with you. Like, I'm almost picturing a mind map where it's like we've got insurance in the center, cyber insurance in the center, and like how many ways can we leverage this in our marketing and sales in our community with chambers, put an ad in the chamber selling this service for and then let your clients know, no, I'm not going to charge you. This is I'll do this for you as our value add. But for the outsiders, yes, it's hours and hours of time, so I'm going to charge for that accordingly. And I bet you get some sales from that. So love it.
Yeah, and then this is these conversations should be happening in QBRs and TBRs, and even if you have insurance, it's changing month to month. So it's a great opportunity to start looking forward to the next renewal. And then you're right, from a prospecting, I would build a whole platform around how I leverage cyber insurance to go into a prospect. And that's what you talk about.
I love it. Excellent. All right. So we only have a couple minutes left. What's coming down the pike? Anything new on the Breach Secure Now side or the Inskyber side, either one?
Yeah, well, we always have lots of new stuff. We're increasing our training, and we came out with our annual training, which is almost like a CSI type of we use an outside agency, and it's really good. I watched it. I'm like, holy cow, this is really excellent. And that's what you really have to get to. You have to get to the point where, if it's just the same old training every week in, week out, people start to tune out. And that's the thing about humans, or they're kind of finicky. You have to keep them engaged, and you have to try different things. So we're really proud about this. Excited and proud about the training. We have lots of automation coming up. We're trying. The thing about Breach Secure Now is we're at 2,300 partners. We're at 15,000 clients, 700,000 users. We're hitting scale, and we're just scratching the surface. So we're starting to look at what are we going to do when we have 70,000 clients and 3 million, 4 million users on here. So We're really thinking about that now. We've been thinking about it for the last year and a half, but we're starting to see that adoption. And what's driving it is cyber insurance, because every carrier, every single one, I did an analysis of 10 different applications. They all want to see that you're training your employees and you're phishing your employees. So that is driving adoption of this. So, that's good stuff. It's, we just gotta stay in front of it and just keep scaling and helping our partners manage that, all of those users that are on that platform.
Amazing. Yeah, you guys are always doing great things, and your marketing team is always like, they come up with such creative ideas, and yeah, like you said, like the training is super quality, and you're up against you're having to engage humans, and we humans, I am one, you are one, like our attention span is getting very short. We're very critical about the kind of content that we consume. Like, we want to be entertained, it needs to be short, like you have to change scenes like every 10 seconds just to keep me engaged. And so that's a tough, you've set the bar, you haven't set the bar, but we humans have set the bar very high, and you guys are constantly stepping up to try to figure out.
We're watching other, consumer platforms, Peloton and Apple and Tonal and what do they do from a leadership board and engagement and charms, and you've taken X amount of classes in a row. So we're, I'm not too proud to say that we're trying to leverage what are the best practices for engaging humans, whether it's in an exercise routine or a cybersecurity exercise routine. So, we're always looking to innovate that way and try to keep moving that platform forward.
But that's brilliant. Anytime you can steal genius from outside of the industry is,
I like to say borrow.
amazing.
I'm not stealing, we're borrowing.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's great. I like it.
So we're excited. We're excited to be at your conference, in Orlando, right?
It's in Orlando this year. Again, this year we are doing it in Orlando. Again, same location. It's a beautiful location. 2024 is going to be someplace new. But yes, it'll be in Orlando. You're coming. You've been always super supportive.
It was fascinating. I actually think your show was the best show of last year. Well, maybe one of the other ones when we did the Friends thing,
Right.
that was fun, but yours was amazing. I loved the speakers that you had. I loved the content, and the facility was amazing. So
the facility was beautiful. Yeah, they have a 5-star chef on hand. Like, it was not hotel food. Like, everything that we do is very different. So we needed the event to be different as well. So we didn't want a hotel. We didn't want yet another dry chicken breast, no offense, but like, we've all had way too many of those. And so, yeah, if you're watching and you don't have your ticket yet, mspsalesrevolution.com/ultimate. It's the Ultimate IT Growth Conference, and we still have some tickets left. We're about halfway full, so get your tickets soon. And we will sell out. So if you don't get your tickets soon, you're gonna be grumpy, because it's gonna be amazing. So,
and it was a great show. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on your webinar here, but it was really good. And I know everyone who was at it was blown away. And
yes,
we're excited to see what you're going to do this year. So
yeah, it's going to be great. Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm working on a chat GPT session. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, got some great speakers coming in, and we've got several sessions on sales. So yeah, good stuff.
And you really did crush it by not just having the conversation around MSP industry. You brought, outside speakers that just talked about motivation or all of those other pieces that was really good. And I can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
I try to get out of conferences now because it's too hard to run the company, keep going to conferences, but that's one that I volunteered, that I said, I'm going to that.
You're like, I'm in. I mean, it's close enough to your home as well. So that makes it a little bit easier. So
yes, exactly. It's true. I don't have to go across the country for that.
Right.
So
amazing. Yep. Well, I will see you then. I may see you on the road between now and then. I'm hitting about a show a month roughly. So there's a few more months between now and June. But we'll do this again soon. Like, I always appreciate your insights and everything you're seeing, and just the value and the knowledge that you're adding to the audience. So
thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Have an amazing rest of your day.
All right.